I've checked, so I am plugged in, at least in terms of the speaking system. It's really a measure of faith when the pastor lets me speak and doesn't ask to see my sermon in advance. But as I said to her before the service started, I said, Mary, you have weeks to change whatever theology I didn't say that was right. So here we go. When Pastor Mary offered me a chance to give the Sunday morning sermon, I could not help but jump at the chance. You see, most speakers have only several weeks in advance to prepare, but for me, I've had a lifetime. With your permission, I would like to share some really important thoughts and observations that I've had in my personal faith journey. For me, life is filled with Polaroid picture moments, which are somehow stitched together in what we call a life. As such, I would like to share a special moment in my life that I've thought about a lot over the years. This moment occurred in my life in the middle of my career in local government, where I had been out in public speaking about the need for more affordable housing and calling for better facilities and services for the homeless. A county colleague came up to me and spoke quietly, saying, "You're different." I was taken back by this observation and quickly said, without much thought, that no, I was just like everybody else. When I look back at that moment, I feel personal regret that I did not use this moment to start a conversation about my faith journey and to say that if this person saw anything different or exceptional in me, that it was the power of Jesus flowing through my life, giving it meaning and purpose. Like many of you, I began my faith journey in a Protestant church. In my high school years, went to an MYF program, which is Methodist Youth Fellowship, where I participated as the commission chairman, and I also was the youth group treasurer. This kind of foreshadowed my future life in government, and so it's interesting how life goes full circle. As a young person, I wanted then, and still want now, for my life to make a difference. I also wanted my life to be plugged into God as the energy source of the universe and fundamentally the empowerment of all things, including my life. Frankly, following Christ can be an exciting journey. It is said that the Lord works in mysterious ways, and I believe it. If someone had told me back in 1969 that I would spend my life living and serving in southern Nevada, I would have laughed at them. As being from New Jersey, it would have been inconceivable to me that I would end up in Las Vegas for much of my adult life. Jesus has said that he is the way, the truth, and the life. Before we had organized religion, the early Christians referred to their faith as the way. To Jesus, the goal of our religious practices and purposes is pretty simple. He said that we are to love the Lord with all our hearts, our minds, and all our might, and to love our neighbors as ourselves. At its essence, we believe that God is love. To me, love is the energy source of the universe, and that we are to be conduits of that love in a growing web of positive relationships with others. As Christians, we are to be like Jesus. As we consider the Lord's earthly ministry, we saw that he spent his life as a rabbi talking about the love of God, healing the sick, and feeding the poor. In a real way, Jesus demonstrated that he came to serve and not to be served. Being Christian is thus about being in relationship with God and loving and serving others. It is that simple. Okay. I'm plugged in everything but this thing. Oh. Okay, here we go. I believe that the 4 successful keys to a successful Christian life are as follows. We've already discussed the first 2 elements mentioned by Jesus, but I believe the other 2 points are critically important. We need to live a life of gratitude. It's important as it opens up our spirit to be a channel of blessing to others. As we daily consider the thousands of ways where we have been personally blessed by God, This opens us in turn to be a conduit to others, a blessing, as God works through us in serving and loving others. I also think the last point is critically important too. Living a life of intention is also important, as it means that our lives have purpose and direction as we respond to the promptings of the Spirit. Pastor Mary mentioned previously at a sermon that she loves the book of Luke. But as for me, I like the muscular Christianity called for in the book of James, where it says that our faith must be put into action, that we are called to do good works. In essence, we are to get our hands dirty, making our faith real to others. As Methodists, we have all heard the above quote of Reverend John Wesley, the founder of our denomination, when he calls upon us to do good in as many ways as you can, for as many people as you can, for as long as you can. I also like the quote from General William Booth, the founder of the Salvation Army, as it calls us not to be paralyzed by analysis, but simply do something. And lastly, the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. also poignantly talks about the quality of our faith and life journey when he asks the simple question, what are you doing for others? I joined the United Methodist Church here in Las Vegas in 1980, so I've had over 40 years of sitting in the pews just like many of you. This has given me a lot of time to consider why I am a Methodist. I believe that our denomination in this church focuses on the heart of the Christian message, which is fundamentally about hope and salvation. Here in this quiet, respectful place, we hear the good news of the saving grace of Jesus and the hope for us individually and for mankind through faith in God and belief in the resurrection. Our lives are changed, and we in turn become empowered, and we are prepared to serve as earthly agents and ambassadors for God. John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist Church, called us to do acts of piety and acts of charity. The first category, acts of piety, includes regular worship, daily prayer, fasting, and Bible study. Frankly, I see these actions as spiritual nourishment, for just as our bodies need daily nutrition, our souls need to be fed so that we are fully empowered for our daily life. Just like a good exercise program, these habits of daily spiritual living are good for us and make our lives more powerful. For me, weekly church attendance also reinforces my wish to do good in the world, and in turn make a difference in the lives of others. Using the power analogy, attending regular worship recharges my batteries and prepares me to continue the good fight in my daily life. Those of you with cell phones know how quickly they are useless if the batteries are not regularly recharged. The church's motto of open hearts, open minds, open doors emphasizes that Methodists are people with grateful hearts, people with a willingness to consider new ideas, and a spirit of hospitality and inclusive worship, inviting all to come to a relationship with Jesus. The symbol of the flame across the cross shows that we are open to the Holy Spirit's warming our hearts, inspiring and guiding us as we walk along in our individual and collective faith journeys. As I participate in worship, I am deeply touched by the beautiful music of praise and the sermons which challenge me to consider more deeply the important elements of my life. And I am in turn encouraged to get into a closer relationship with Jesus. I see the Methodist Church as a denomination which actually reflects the gentle ways of Jesus, as we are not yelled at or made to feel guilty, but instead are thoughtfully and quietly encouraged to love others and to serve God through our works, words, and our deeds. John Wesley also called us to do acts of charity or good works. As a person who worked in local government for 33 years, I saw my career as an opportunity to do positive things to improve the living conditions of my fellow man. I believe that many of you also share that sentiment in your own work careers. During the 30 years that I worked for Clark County, which is where we live, we were able to finance the development of thousands of units of affordable housing and to build an assortment of capital facilities in our lower-income neighborhoods. These included recreation centers, senior centers, parks, food banks, rural water systems, fire stations, early childhood development centers, healthcare facilities, libraries, industrial parks, etc. It just goes on. After I retired from Clark County in 2008, I have served for the past 12 years on the board of directors for Nevada Hand, the largest nonprofit housing developer in Nevada, where I also served as the chairman of the housing subcommittee. This organization, along with other nonprofits or organizations, has worked to create thousands of additional units of affordable housing for seniors and families in the community. This is a family unit development under construction at Decatur Commons, and this is the completed senior portion at Decatur Commons. Working alongside members of this church, I have been privileged to see many wonderful things done in the name of Jesus. In 1994, I visited Mexico with members of the University United Methodist Church, where we were involved in the initial construction of the St. Paul Methodist Church in Guaymas, Mexico. I thought it was kind of funny that in Spanish, Methodist is Methodista. You remember Sandinistas, but we're the Methodistas in Mexico. Anyway, it's the San Pablo Methodist Church in Guaymas, Mexico. And we were involved in the initial construction of that church. In 1995, I again returned to Mexico with a group of men and women from the Green Valley United Methodist Church to continue that construction project. Following that hands-on experience, my wife and I subsequently joined the church in 1996. And this is the church today in worship. So the things we were involved in 25 years ago as a church, members of this church, we helped in the construction of this building along with University United and others to help construct this Methodist church in Guaymas, Mexico. Over the past 27 years as a member of this church, I have worked with many of you on various church and community service projects. I remember working with the men of this church in the construction of the church's educational building, where members of the church, including then Pastor Bob Burns, did the rough framing and electrical work with the final work done by licensed contractors. I mean, it was kind of an interesting experience seeing a pastor pulling wire through conduit. And I also remember pounding a plywood wall on the western wall in July at 12 o'clock noon. You can imagine how hot that was. I also remember working with Jerry Arbogast and Tom Steyer in building a ramp for the handicapped for a lady in this community who was trapped in a wheelchair and could not get down the steps of her mobile home until we constructed the necessary ramp. I also went with Linda and Doug Reynolds on a mission trip to Salt Lake City, where we worked at the Umpqua warehouse assembling health and school kits for emergency distribution. And this is putting together a health kit with toothpaste and other stuff. Then we put them in these big barrels, and then they were taken by a 16-wheeler to the ports to be transported. And I kind of enjoyed telling my Mormon friends I was going on a mission to Salt Lake. In addition to regular landscaping work, I have also worked with many of you in planting the new trees on our campus, and there's Mel. If you didn't recognize yourself, there you are. And then Dwayne Smith, who is just an amazing guy when it comes to landscaping. He's been such a stalwart in keeping this campus up. I've also been active in feeding the homeless at St. Timothy's and monthly buying the food supplies for this ministry. And this past year, we recruited Mary. She signed up just like you guys have an opportunity to sign up, and she's been participating with us in feeding the meals. And there's many amongst you who have also been involved in regularly feeding the homeless in St. Timothy's. I jokingly think that our meal is the best, but I'm sure the rest of you might disagree. And I've also worked with teams at 3 Square where we prepared weekend food bags for young people. I've also played my horn in the church worship services and also for the Salvation Army in their Christmas kettle drives, as well as in teaching young people how to play brass instruments. When we joined the Methodist Church, we publicly professed to uphold it with our prayers, our gifts, and our service. I want to say that one more time. When we joined the Methodist Church, we publicly profess to uphold it with our prayers, our gifts, and our service. By that I mean not just money, but our time involved in supporting the church and in our service to mankind through our various mission efforts. I can honestly say that I love this church, and even more, I can say that I am grateful to God for the many blessings in my life and the opportunity to devote my life in public service, both in my career and in my retirement as a volunteer. Doing acts of charity or good works makes you feel good down deep as the Spirit warms your soul in service and making you more connected to people. I also remember many times thinking to myself that I really love these fellow servers and that I want to spend my time being around positive people who care about helping others and doing good. If this is loving your fellow man, then count me in, as it is truly better to give than to receive. I mean, every time people say, oh, it's nice of you feeding the homeless, they don't get it. When you feed the homeless or you do these services to mankind, you feel good. It's more helping you feel good as you serve others. There is so much more I could say, but I have to wait until Pastor Mary, gives me another opportunity to again talk about things that really matter. I would encourage you all to get plugged in, as your lives will be richly blessed, and so that you may feel the joy that comes from helping others. Thank you.